Joe Dolio from Tactical Wisdom. Dolio.
It's Dolio.
Dang it.
It's just like it's spelled. My parents, they don't like me. That's why they made my name rhyme, Joe Dolio. Hi guys, I'm glad you guys all came out. My name is Joe. I'm the author of the Tactical Wisdom book series. We've got a few copies over there available. I can sign them for you today. Basically, my books are about being prepared. And there's a Bible verse in each chapter that shows you that God wants you to be prepared, right? So we have to think about that. And I got a lot of questions when I first came here about my logo, so I'll explain it to you and why Tactical Wisdom came about. This logo is the Jerusalem cross. It's the symbol of the kingdom of Jerusalem when it was ruled by Christians in the late 1000s, early 1100s. It was the only place in the world at the time that allowed religious freedom. That's kind of how I feel about us. But I also feel like we might be on the downhill side of that. If you look at the news today, you look at anything, they're trying to pretty much make Christianity appear to be an evil thing and trying to stomp it out. So I decided I was just going to put it up there and let it be my logo, and we're going to wear it proud. So that's the story of that. Basically, the book series came about because I talk too much. I talk a lot about preparedness, and my wife said, maybe you should put it in a book and I won't have to listen to you anymore. So then the books came out. But basically, they will take you from the basic level of preparedness all the way up through some advanced skills of getting out and protecting your neighborhood and your homes and things like that. The reason for that is we want to be self-sufficient. The government doesn't want you to be self-sufficient. That's the reason why they continue to infringe upon your Second Amendment rights. They don't want you to be able to provide for your own security. They want you to rely upon them to protect you. I say, no, I'm going to be self-sufficient. I'm going to continue to do my own things. So while we're here at a Second Amendment event, this really applies to everything in your life. It's a superpower to know how to grow food, right? To be self-sufficient and therefore not reliant on anyone else for food, especially with inflation right now. Being reliant on yourself and your neighbors for security, forming a group that's going to protect your own neighborhood and protect your own community is far better than relying on somebody who may or may not come or may not answer the phone. And I know we had a lot of speakers here about the Second Amendment, but the skill that I wanted to talk about today is more about communications and how to stay in touch with each other. One of the first things that's going to happen in any sort of a disaster scenario or tyrannical government scenario, I'm talking about the Chinese for the sheriff's deputy who was here, not our government. Our government would never be tyrannical. That was a joke. But anyway, one of the first things that's going to happen is your communications, your ability to talk to each other is going to get cut off. They're already trying to throw everyone off of social media. They're trying to restrict what you can and can't say. And we're also getting to the point where businesses are saying, well, if you're going to talk about certain things, maybe you shouldn't be allowed a phone line, or maybe you shouldn't be allowed a bank account. So we have to create parallel systems where we can work with each other through, I know we talked about the central bank digital currency. Find your own way around that. Learn to trade with each other. Learn to barter. And these are the kind of things that I talk about. But on communications, you have to have another way to get a hold of your family. Now, this community doesn't remember, but because you're the only place that had power. But in 2002, you guys remember the giant power outage that happened everywhere? Well, me and my family, I loaded up the kids and drove them out here to have dinner because y'all had power and nobody else in the state did. But when that happened, no one knew it was going to happen ahead of time, and you had no way to get in touch with your family and friends. And a lot of folks say, well, I'll use my cell phone. Well, those cell phone towers are only going to work for an incredibly limited amount of time because they are on gas generators. They're going to run out of power. And they're going to be overloaded with everyone else who had that exact same idea as you. It's better to learn how to use radios of some type to get in communication. And I talk about that in my books. I wanted to give a real short thing on what everyone can do today to make you and your family a little more prepared. There are a lot of different options for radios that you can get that don't require a license. You don't have to invite the government even more into your life. Ham radio guys, just ignore me for a few minutes because I'm about to make your heads explode. Ham radio guys hate it when I do this. You don't need a ham radio license. You can get, there are lots of license-free options like CB. And a lot of people chuckle when I mention CB because they think of the 70s and Breaker 19 and all that kind of nonsense. But listen, no one is using it right now. There are 30 or more channels not being used that you and your family could set up as an emergency communications network. CB radios are the easiest radios to find in America. They're in every truck stop. They're all over the place. And I guarantee you there are millions of them in garages that when the power goes out, people are going to go pull those out of the garage. That was their grandfather's radio or their dad's radio. They're going to plug it in and try to make contact with people. It's a great way for you to gather information about what's going on. And CB has come a long way. You can now use FM on CB. That means you get better clarity and a little bit better range. And the newer handheld CBs are even smaller. I remember when I was younger, a handheld CB was like, it weighed 7 pounds, it was 3 feet long, and you didn't really want to use it. I've got some over there I can show you guys, are real small, and they're a great tool. And it doesn't require a license, so you don't have to get permission from your overlords to use it. Above that, there's another system called the Family Radio Service. Now, those are radios you can buy at like Walmart, Target, all those places. They have very limited range. They got about a half mile of range. They'll say 32 miles on the box. They're lying to you. It gets about a half mile. But you can also buy other radios that will talk on those. And if you get a license, it's called a GMRS license from your overlords, like you're supposed to, you can talk probably 3 to 4 miles with those radios. And that's a great way to stay in touch with your family in an emergency. There's the Family Radio Service. There's also another one that doesn't require a license. It's called MERS. And you can learn about it online and program into your radios, but they get a little bit better range, and absolutely no license is required. It does limit your power to just a couple of watts, which will get you a couple of miles. But in the event of an emergency, I'm not going to be too worried about the federal government's limits on how much power I can push to my radio. The most important thing for you in an emergency is to be able to find your people and make sure everyone is okay. And if everyone, in addition to carrying your first aid kit, carrying your defensive firearm, you also had a radio available, whether it's in your car or in your backpack or somewhere that you could get to in an emergency, you're that much more ready and self-sufficient. I can call my people and say, hey, listen, I'm good. This is the route I'm taking to come home. And I can be in touch with someone. And another piece to this is there's a national organization that has set up a program called the Channel 3 Project. Whatever kind of radio you have, whether it's CB, Family Radio Service, or MERS radio, if you turn it to Channel 3 at the top of every hour in an emergency, there will be other like-minded people listening. It's a way for people who are stranded or in an emergency to call for help. Everyone turns the radio to Channel 3 and listens at the top of the hour, and you can get help from them, or they might be able to give you information about the area, like, hey, that road, the bridge is out, you're going to need to go around it. And that's why having a radio with you will help you get a little more information and be a little bit more safe, a little bit more ready and prepared. And more importantly, the government absolutely hates it when you are ready and prepared and you don't need them. They want you to rely on them. I was actually involved in the Hurricane Katrina response as a contractor, and they call it the Federal Emergency Management Agency for a reason. If they really wanted to help you, they'd call it the Federal Emergency Resolution Agency. They don't. They want to manage it. They want you to get money from them, get food from them, and live where they want you to live. And I want you to not do that. I want you to be self-sufficient. So fight for your Second Amendment rights, the ability to keep and bear arms for your own protection. Learn first aid so that you don't have to rely on somebody else to save you if you get injured. And learn how to use a radio so that you can call your own people, like-minded people, for help when the time comes rather than having to rely on others. So you can check out my blog. It's at tactical-wisdom.com, where I talk about these kind of things a couple times a week. You can also find me, there's a news show that's on YouTube every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 p.m. called the Council on Future Conflict. Me and a bunch of other, well, they're knowledgeable, I'm not. A bunch of knowledgeable people get on there and we talk about the current events and what trends are happening, what's going on, and how you can be a little more aware and ready for the bad things coming in life. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Joe. That's awesome.
Okay, so with me today, we have Micah from 2AEDU. Have you guys heard of a little bitty YouTube station that has over 65,000 viewers regularly? Micah is a genius when it comes to firearms and somebody I talk to every time I buy a new firearm. And then right next to me, I have Joe Dolio. He is a survivalist and author who's written 5 books, Joe?
5 books.
Yeah, 5 books. Joe has an amazing amount of skill set to teach us how we can survive, especially if we have lost the rule of law, right?
When nobody else is coming.
There you go.
You are your own rescue.
And then the lady who has gotten me out of more scraps than I can ever really talk about, one of the best Second Amendment lawyers on the planet, and probably somebody who's going to defend me at least 3 times this year, Kristina Lyke, attorney Kristina Lyke. So let's start out with the state of things, where we are right now. At the Capitol, we've passed, I think, 1,022 laws in the last 120 days. Out of those laws, Micah, how many of those were Second Amendment laws that we had to worry about? How many of those? Was it 120 of those that were red flag bills?
Well, quite a few. I mean, you've got now up to almost 4 dozen gun control bills that have either been passed or are propagating their way through committees or have been introduced in Michigan right now.
That's a lot. Now, keep in mind, in the last session of Congress, I don't believe that we passed as many bills in that entire year than we have in the first 120 days. And the governor is out there saying that she has a mandate, that because she's got one person in Eaton Rapids that's a gun owner that says that she should have this safe laws, that somehow she's exempt, that she can run roughshod over all of us, but that's just not the case. So one thing that we haven't talked about is Micah and I have been going over to the Capitol. And I'll say Micah's been going to the Capitol quite a bit more than I have. And what are we going there for? Trying to build awareness. We are trying to build awareness with liberals that have never touched a gun before. Do you imagine what that's like? It's hard. It's horrible. But it's necessary work that has to happen. And out of any of these laws that are going to come into action, are any of them constitutional based, Kristina?
No, they're not constitutional based. In my opinion, with the New York versus Bruin case, and you know you wanted me to talk about this, but
It's a really cool case.
yeah, I'm going to save that for one of the Republican things that Jennifer Smith's going to be having me doing. But just so you know, that case really there is making these laws unconstitutional. So there are a lot of things that some attorneys can be doing, and I believe I'm going to be trying to help on that aspect too as well, because what I am actually seeing, and I was going to talk about this as my talk later on today, but what I have actually been seeing in some of our police reports lately is these police officers who are in liberal counties are actually making it look like you're mentally ill when you're not. Oh, I remember when this guy, he had an open carry gun on him and he was walking down and someone else called the police. Well, sure, a liberal, just like you said, illiterate people who are ignorant, who have never held a gun, actually call the police because they see an open carry, so they must be crazy, right? So then they call the police, and then they go and talk to the guy, and there's no police report. There's maybe one police report, but then they keep that police report, so they build their case to make sure that you look like you're nuts. And that's what I'm starting to see. And so, yes, to your question, I can go on and on, but yes, unconstitutional. All these laws are unconstitutional in my opinion, and we're gonna be seeing a lot of lawsuits, and it's got to go to the Supreme Court of the United States, not in Michigan.
So Joe, what do you think about this?
I think she's absolutely right, but what's important to note is that the Michigan Constitution goes farther for you, technically, than the United States Constitution. The Michigan Constitution says that you have a right to bear arms for the defense of yourself and the state. That's not in the federal Constitution, that's in our state one. So as you see them passing these more and more restrictive laws, they're violating the state Constitution as well as the federal. And the state one protects you a little more.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Is it Joe?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I guess I will. The problem is with the state constitution, as you can see, that we have tried to amend our constitutions with the voting. Okay, so we just amended our constitution a few months ago, not a few months ago, but last election. We amended our constitution with marijuana, didn't we?
Yep.
Right. So I guess state of Michigan's constitution doesn't mean anything, right? So really what's going to be higher level is federal. And I have to tell you, with our Supreme Court justices, you only have one that's in your favor, Joe. Only one. We're kind of messed over here in Michigan.
So are you guys getting this? So Joe's technically right. The authors of the Michigan Constitution wrote it in a way to protect us, but as happenstance would have it, Kristina's right too. We have no Michigan Supreme Court that we could actually take something to that would actually be looked at reasonably, let alone an appellate court or any of the other courts. They're all owned by Democrats right now. So we're really in a bind right now. We have to, when we talk about we're going to fight these things after they become bills, that's too long. That's too long.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Oh, thank you. So that brings me to the next thing. You know, I always thought the most important people were the legislatures. You know why? Because they make the laws. And I always wanted to do good things for people. That's all, you know, all I wanted to do is do good things for people, right? But the thing of it is the legislature makes the laws. Who interprets the laws, right? The judicial system. So it makes the next point very important. Why aren't we having our judges, our judge candidates, coming to these functions or coming to the Republican Party and telling about themselves? Because I gotta let you know, a lot of them are gonna fool you, the candidates. And you wanna ask them questions, but you know, as a judge candidate, they cannot tell you how they're gonna rule on something, right? They cannot tell you. But what you wanna do is ask them questions and see their facial expressions. If they say they're gonna follow the Constitution, and then they don't do it the term that they're in, guess what? You go get another judge and you fill their spot. Because too many times I go in front of judges and they've never have held a gun in their entire life. And that's the reason I was so afraid of these red flag laws and the Extreme Protection Act. Because I've actually had to tell a judge that suicides do not happen because of guns. Suicides happen. Do you know what the #1 suicide thing is?
What is it?
It is actually pills, and it's actually putting the car into the garage as well. They're kind of tied.
Oh, where they use the carbon monoxide?
Correct. And the thing of it is, you know why people don't want to use a gun to commit suicide?
Really messy?
Exactly.
Oh.
They don't want their face to be messed up in the coffin. I just thought I'd throw that out there because I had to actually state that on the record to somebody, to a judge. And I told him I'd get the statistics for him, and then I didn't know that her friend just committed suicide with a gun, so foot in the mouth, right? But I said, well, in any case, I'll get the statistics for you. I did say I was sorry, though.
So, Micah, can you give us an update about what's happening in your side of the woods there as far as the Capitol's concerned and with your folks online on YouTube?
Yeah, I think what we're experiencing right now is a tyrannical government. And when you look at what is a tyrant is somebody who rules outside of the rule of law. You know, the United States Constitution is supposed to be the supreme law of the land. The Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. That's the end of it. That's supposed to be the end of it, at least according to the Founding Fathers. You look at the Michigan Constitution. Every person has the right to keep and bear arms in defense of himself and the state. That's supposed to be the supreme law of Michigan, and that's the Constitution of 1963. We're not talking 1700s. Just 60 years ago, the people in Michigan knew what it meant to defend yourself from a tyrannical government. And here we are with the narrowest possible majority in the Michigan Senate and the Michigan House. They have a 2-seat majority, which means if one seat would flip, it would be a tie. Now in the Senate, you have Gilchrist, the lieutenant governor, as the tiebreaker, but not in the House. If we flipped one House seat, now look, this is only the beginning because we have what's called rhinos. There's Republicans that vote for gun control too, and 5 of them recently did.
They sure did.
However, the party that's in charge controls the committees. They control the gavel. And every time I've been to Lansing, I'm noticing the Democrats acting like they have a 90% supermajority. It feels like we're in Haight-Ashbury, California, or New York City. And they basically have come as close as they could in 120 days to ruining this state. That's what I've noticed.
And just for a second, let's talk about that. I remember one of the most remarkable YouTube sessions you've had is when you were watching bills get voted on, and it was like listening to the announcer when the Hindenburg crashed. That's what you sounded like. It was like, oh my God, and now this is happening and this is happening. It was where we actually were able to see the power of that gavel. I didn't see that there was that much power in the gavel. Talk about that. Let's deface that.
Okay, so how does a bill become a law? It starts off with these dog and pony show committees where they'll stack 7 Democrats against 2 Republicans in many cases. That's not proportionate because the Democrats have the narrowest possible majority. They rush it through committee. They make substitute bills sometimes that are literally introduced while they're in session on the floor. So we have House members not even knowing what they're voting on because it's been changed in the back room by the Democrats minutes before. And then you get out to the floor. Well, they'll do a recorded roll call vote where they put their names on the board and everyone can see how they voted, but they're skipping some key steps here. There's something called amendments. And you could have a bill that is anti-2A in nature, but normally, even if it's a minority party, they have the right to put amendments up that could amend that bill. They could put poison pill amendments, meaning they could put something so pro-2A in there, and if they could get that amendment to pass, it would kind of negate the bill itself. See, Democrats are good at doing that. If I could digress for 2 seconds, let's go back to the 1980s. In the United States government with Ronald Reagan, there was a law put through called the Firearms Owners Protection Act. And it's actually the law that allows us to still travel freely through states as long as you're not making unnecessary stops. You could travel through a state where your gun's restricted to get to your destination and other things. However, a Democrat by the name of Hughes put in a poison pill amendment called the Hughes Amendment. And that fundamentally changed this country because after May 19th of 1986, machine guns no longer became transferable in this country unless they were grandfathered in. So the Democrats were able to take a pro-gun bill, okay, on the federal level, poison it with banning machine guns, and it passed. Now, certain gun rights groups said that they would fight it in court. They didn't. People say Reagan got tricked. You can be the judge of that. Now let's fast forward to Lansing. The Republicans, they'll literally say, do we have an amendment? They'll try to seek recognition for amendment, and they'll just say, the amendment is not offered. They're not letting them do proper amendments. And then when they vote on the bill, at the end, after it's done, the majority floor leader, Ayash, will say, I move for immediate effect.
Yeah, what's up with that clicking of the gavel? What's that all about?
Okay, so basically we have the Speaker of the Michigan House, which is Joe Tate. Representative Pohutsky, a Democrat, normally presides and holds the gavel and sits in his place as the Speaker. That's a formality that's usually done. So what they'll do is they'll say, I move for immediate effect. And then she'll say, the clerk will open the board, the clerk taps this little thing, tap, 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 and she says immediate effect's granted. Now here's the weird thing, if you're watching it on TV or if you're there live, nobody voted, nobody even had time to stand up. Sometimes people say yay or nay, but usually not. And here's the crazy part. If you look at the actual Constitution and how immediate effect's supposed to work, a law can pass just on the majority of all members that are elected and serving. Not voting and present, but elected and serving. So they have to have a majority. Well, you have to have a 2/3 majority for a bill to take immediate effect if it gets signed into law. They're passing these things with immediate effect, even though you will have like a 51% majority that voted for it, 49% voted against the bill, but they're doing this fake immediate effect vote and just passing it right through. Now this is for the House. The Senate is still following some decorum, and they are still doing up and down yay and nay votes in the Senate.
So we need to get over to a new area. The more and more we talk about how these laws are passing, I feel really, really exposed. I feel very vulnerable. I feel like I have zero control over my future or where I'm going to go. And then in comes Joe Dolio, where he is a survivalist. He's an author. He talks about ways that I can save my section of my life. Joe, I mean, for people never, that are losing like a lot of, they're really fearful right now. I mean, what kind of hopeful things can you tell them to do that are simple, easy tasks that everybody can do?
I think that the first thing that we can do is stop inviting government intrusion into our lives. Stop going down paths that lead to more contact with them. You can live most of your life without any government involvement by not challenging, by not letting them in, I guess this. I don't mean challenge, not letting them in. Do what you do without asking permission. The fundamental status of anything in our constitutional system is that it's legal unless there's a law against it, right? So stop asking permission for things. Do what you do, what you've always done, and when we ask, that's when I say, hey, you know, it's interesting you guys want to do that. We need to come up with a commission to create some rules and regulations to limit you on that. And that's where it all starts, that's where it all begins. Politicians need a reason to exist, and the reason that they have is to make rules for you to live by. That doesn't sound like any fun to me at all. So I think that we need to find ways to go to smaller government, less involvement and less intrusion in your life, and we do that by being more self-sufficient and more able to provide for ourselves. If I can provide for my own security, I don't need the local sheriff's department. It's great to have a great constitutional sheriff, love it, but grant money has largely negated the role of the sheriff because he needs that grant money more than he needs your goodwill. So you have to figure out ways in which you can live your life without their involvement. But just like these guys are all saying here, you have to be involved in the political process. You have to know what they are doing in your name that limits your freedom. Ironically, you'll notice that most of these laws they pass have special exemptions for them, and they don't necessarily have to follow them. Or the representative who gets a drunk driving arrest and gets it swept under the rug where you wouldn't. They've lost, in my opinion, their moral right to lead. And what you need to be doing is, just like she mentioned, you need to be challenging these judge candidates. You need to be challenging House of Representative candidates, challenging them. They're supposed to represent you. They're not supposed to get elected, go there and push their agenda. That's what we've gotten to, but that's not what the Founding Fathers envisioned. They envisioned that representative going to Washington, D.C., seeing what the issues are, and then coming back and asking their constituents what they want. Be vocal and be known to your representatives, whether they're state, federal, or whatever, so that they know what your will is. Now, are they going to suddenly change their mind? No, but you're at least getting on the record as saying, this is what we really want. You have to let them know that, not just elect them and let them be on their own for the next 4 years. You need to stay involved with what they're doing, keeping track of it, and sharing that with your community so they know how to vote the next time.
Can I add something?
You can,
All right.
and you should.
Thank you. So I'm going to add something right now. I've noticed a lot of us are, I'm not going to put myself in that boat, but some people are pretty chicken out there, the Republicans. And I'm not saying that you get on Facebook. I see a lot of you guys get on Facebook and you start some fights, even with ourselves. And first of all, we got to stop that because we got to grow the Republican Party and grow the conservatives and grow more people. Because if they see us fighting in between each other, first of all, we're never going to win the House back. We're never going to win the Senate back. We're never going to get that crazy ice cream lover out of the White House if he's there. But the thing of it is, we got to stop this. But the biggest thing is I see is that we are not sticking up for ourselves. And when the Democrat or a liberal goes after you, you run and hide. And then guess what they do? They go after you some more because they know that they can get after you. So what do? And I know that you're going to probably say, well, that attorney's just trying to get some money right now. I know that, I got to tell you, that's not why I'm up here. I do a lot of different things, but I say, I love what I do. I do make money what I do. But you know what? I do a lot of good things too for charitable causes. But here's the thing that you have to do. Whether it be myself or another attorney, you go and send them a cease and desist letter. Because that cease and desist letter is so important and imperative that you do that. Because if you send one out and they do it again, they come after you, cyberbullying, you can go after them with a PPO. And guess what? They can't come to your school board elections. They cannot, wherever you are, they can't go to Myers. If they see you in Myers, they've got to be out of that store because they get a PPO violation and they get to go to jail, right? And so that's the best thing for you to do. And then that way, it also causes them not to go to the school board meetings and the Republican meetings. And shoot, you might even get a chance to do it at some of the media people too, right? So I'm just saying we need to start fighting back because these are what these individuals have been teaching the Democrats, and we need to, aren't we the honest people? We have integrity. we love our God, we love our Constitution, and we love people, right? And we want to make America great again, make Michigan great again, right? So what do? We got to protect our own people. We got to make sure that we protect each other. So we got to start sticking up for ourselves, and we have to do it legally, not go to their house and beat them up or anything, okay? 'Cause
I'm not opposed to that.
Me neither.
as an officer of the court, I have to say that I don't
Well,
condone that.
she has to defend me when I do, so maybe I shouldn't say that. I do want to say also that everyone here has heard of wokeness, right? Have you noticed that there's a strong similarity between wokeness and religion? If you haven't, I want you to consider it a religion. Because if you do that, then you understand the absolute loyalty that the left has to wokeness. And you're not going to combat wokeness by capitulating, by showing your belly. When they take an inch, it's a mile. It's unfortunate that we have to stand at a time where maybe some of our parents and our grandparents didn't have to stand. But these are different times. We do have to, like our forefathers, we have to put our livelihood on the line. We right here, up here right now, are definitely putting our livelihood on the line when we do this. We know that, but we think the cause is higher than that. If we had 20 people from each county doing the same things that we were doing, then we would already be successful. And then, as we've already said, several of us, the only people who really understand how to eat their own are conservatives. We are very, very good at eating our own. We fight over 5% when we have 95% in common, and we shouldn't do that. In contrast, the left has 2% in common, and they rally behind that 2%. That's why they're winning. That's why we're losing. We can talk about unfair elections. We can talk about all kinds of things. All might be true, but really it comes down to that. Who else has something to add?
No, that was really well said, and that's an important piece. The left considers themselves activists. We consider ourselves just politically active. We need to consider ourselves activists and be out, be more vocal, be more seen. For example, if you look at my Twitter feed, there'll be a dumpster fire at the top, and I'm doing just like she said. I'm not giving an inch to them. And you have to be that way, not just on social media. You need to be that way in real life, talking about your rights, talking to other people. Liberals do it. Why are we not doing it? Because we're afraid of rocking the boat. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't rock the boat, we end up in the camps. You might think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. You need to rock that boat. You need to make your voices heard and multiply. Get more people out there. If each one of us gets 5 more people involved, look at how many we could impact.
If we had 20 people in each county that put as much effort into trying to promote the conservative cause as these 4 people are, we would have very successful counties. It's unfortunate that most of our counties have way too many people who have the feeling that this is a temporary thing, that it's going to go away, and don't get caught up in that number of 20. Okay, I mean, each county's different. I mean, when you go into Wayne County, there's so many people in Wayne County, there should be extravagantly more than that, right? But the idea is that if all of us took a piece of this pie and we ran with it, it'd be a heck of a lot better of a load. That conservatives have a lot to lose. We tend to be fairly successful. We get comfortable with our successful life, and we want to just tithe and get on with our world. But unfortunately, our world is different than that now. Our world is one where we have to now put our livelihood on the line because we've been complacent for too long. Okay? The difference between our nation and Israel is that our kids go to universities to get indoctrinated to hate our country, and Israelis go into the service to love their country. That is completely different. We need to look at that. We have 1 minute, so you better
Wrap it up. I got 5 more minutes. Just so you know, our government is different. I mean, do you know, I was so thankful Paula Kaltwriter had me come and speak at the Capitol one day, and it was about the First Amendment, and it was about prayer, and it also was about, and they didn't ask me to pray. I told my mom I'm sorry, they wanted me to speak about the First Amendment, and I love to do that too, because that's why I became an attorney too as well. But the thing of it is that the people came here to our country and built this country. Why? Because of the fact is they wanted their freedom of religion. They wanted their freedom of faith. And that's what our country was built on. Israel, we are completely different than Israel, okay? And we have to abide by our Constitution. We can't go rewrite the Constitution, and nor will I ever go and submit that to you, because our Constitution works. And that's the reason why I'm so proud of the justice actually stood up and actually stated in the Bruin case that we're not going to follow that two-pronged test. We're going to go back to what the founders said, no restrictions. So when we do have a seminar on that, I would like to go back in history and talk about all of that, because that's a very interesting case.
Okay, so we're out of time, but I want to go back through everyone that brought their equity to this stage, and I want you to end with some parting thoughts, just something that you'd like everybody to leave with. So, Joe, you start, and then Micah, you're next, and Kristina, you clean up.
As Kristina just said, the Constitution is a fantastic document, and it works when we hold them to it. And that is our problem right now. We're allowing them to operate outside of it, and I think that you need to hold your elected leaders responsible to coloring within the lines, staying within the Constitution, both the state and the federal one.
Yeah, I would just say our rights don't come from government. They actually don't even come from the Constitution. They come from God. And as Thomas Jefferson wrote in his mid-30s in 1776, all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And where does the government come in? That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So if you're not happy with what the government's doing, you need to not consent. And remember that the supreme law of the land since 1791 says shall not be infringed. And that's the encouragement that I have for you.
Excellent, excellent. My parting thought is I want you to look directly in back of you. I want you to see Kristina Camaro, and I want you to see Jennifer Smith. These two ladies are completely grassroots ladies. They are our future for the Republican Party. We have a great opportunity to actually win in 2024. We need to make sure that the Michigan GOP is fully funded and that the Livingston County GOP is fully funding. That's what we need. So I want everybody to make sure, unlike other events, I want you to make sure you can go over there, and she's very approachable. Go up to Kristina and tell her who you are. She wants to hear from you. Okay? All right. And Kristina, clean up.
All right. One more thing that Thomas Jefferson said was, knowledge is power. And I love that quote, because the thing that is, I went to Thomas Jefferson's house one day, and I made sure Dan had to go to that with me. Where's Dan Willihan? He's back there.
He's back there with Joe.
Not listening to me. What a good fiance, right, guys?
He's taking care of Judge.
Anyway, I just want to say this. You brought up Jennifer Smith. She is one that actually has gone to the mat for all of us. She's started with the Moms for Liberty. She's done a lot of things for the children in our schools. I mean, we should be very proud of having Jennifer be ahead of our Republican Party in our county. But the number two thing is, some of you don't know this, but she's had a really rough year this year because she's had a PPO against her from a liberal Democrat.
Yeah, very true.
Right? And they went to Washington County. Oh, and by the way, just so all of you know, if you want to get a PPO, you can go anywhere in the state. And I want you to know this. Go to Washington County and file your PPO on the individuals, because they will accept them. And I'll be more than happy to go down there with you, because the thing that is, that judge knows me now. And we'll clean up down there, all right? So I say we all go to all go to Washington County, all of us Livingston County people, because she said everybody's welcome. That's my.
All right, thank you guys very much. Thank you for my panelists for being up here. We're going to do this again next week.